Hey everybody, welcome in. It is December 31st, 2018. This is part 2, like I was kind of mentioning before. I wanted to make a video not necessarily relating to the championship, or I guess the finale, but more or less kind of like the whole season in perspective on a couple of areas. So, number 1 is the Highman, and I kind of just went back in time. It was pretty easy if anyone's interested. They can just go into our league and just look at each week and see who scored the most points in whatever week. So, and I know before the season, I think there was some concerns that maybe the top tier teams would get it more often than the lower tier teams in kind of a staggered fashion. And I think to some level there is some truth to it, because if you're a good team and you're a playoff team, and you have a better team than those that are, in the bottom half, you're probably more likely to put up more points on a given week. That's just kind of how fantasy works. So I think there's some truth to it, but I would like to point out that Brittany, who finished 5th, Weston, who was, I think, finished 9th, Brady finished 7th, and Katie, who finished 12th, were the only 4 managers or teams that didn't actually get the Highman. In fact, Jay and CJ, who both finished 1st and 2nd, only got it once each. And the vast majority of teams that got it were Tori, myself, and then Travis and Eli were the top 4 teams. And Eli finished 11th. And for most of the season, Eli was not in great shape, but he turned it around. And I think as a whole, and I'll just kind of list it off: Tori, 5th, who had 5 total Highmans and finished 4th. Myself with 3 Highmans, and I finished 3rd. Travis, who finished 6th, had 2. Eli, who finished 11th, had 2. And then everyone else that got it: CJ, Scott, Jay, and Gabe. Ruby, all had it once. So I think there's some level of truth to it, just because I think it makes the most sense that the better teams tend to put up more points, or have a better chance to put up the most points in any given week. But I think for the most part, it's relatively balanced, to the point that 75% of the teams at least got their quote-unquote money back from the initial buy-in. Okay, Samantha's sneaking in under the camera because I am standing on my desk. Yeah, you are so funny.
She's holding that.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, you are so funny. Anyway, so
Okay. Ruby.
Yeah.
Ruby, where's your hedgie? Where's your hedgie?
She dropped it. Anyway.
I don't know where her hedgie.
Anyway, part 2 that I wanted to go over was before the season, I had created a spreadsheet about where people drafted and how they finished, and in term if there was any kind of correlation. Thank you, Samantha, for your background. Oh, I didn't see that. It was pretty sneaky, actually. Anyway, so CJ breaking the streak. So anytime CJ finished drafted or in the middle, like 5th, 6th, 7th, he had finished in the bottom half. Actually, the bottom 4, 8th and 10th, were the other 2 times, or I guess 11th, CJ had avoided the sack last year. Can't forget that. But CJ broke it. So I think before the season I was saying, CJ doesn't really do well, even though that's his favorite place to draft. He actually does much better when he's drafting in the back end, and that did not hold true. Some other interesting things: Weston. There is no correlation, but Weston has finished as a top 4 team in 4 of the last 6 years. This year and in 2016 were the only 2 years, and it was sandwiched. In 2015, it was sandwiched between finishing in 6th and then 2017 finishing 4th. Also, interesting tidbit: Jay, anytime he has a top 3 pick, he finishes as a top. A top 2 team, or a top 6 team, sorry. So he's had the 2nd overall pick once, and then the 1st overall pick twice, and he's finished as a top 16 in every single one of those years, and then finished 2nd overall in 2 of those years. Another interesting tidbit is that I have been a top 6 team for all 6 of the last years, and 5 of the last 6 years have been a top 4 team. So I wanted to kind of go into, and I'll probably post this at a later time, the spreadsheet, so you guys can actually see, but how everyone has finished cumulatively over the past, or over the history of the league. So what I did was I took the finish and then divided that by 6, since there's been 6 years since 2013. And also looking into this too, CJ has only won 2 championships in the last 6 years, so during this current phase of our league. I know we had other years, which is why I think CJ has 3 now in terms of that. So obviously, we're not taking that 3rd championship away from CJ. It's obviously well-deserved. But anyway, let's go over these top-tier rankings. So I guess we'll go from last to first to kind of create some, mystery. My buddy Joe is trying to put his child down to sleep. Anyway, sorry for interrupting that. I find it very fitting. Katie has actually, over the past 6 seasons, Katie on average has finished 8th. And that's kind of reigned true. Katie has finished 9th 3 times, 12th once, 3rd, and also 6th. So, yeah, Katie at 8 has finished cumulatively 8. Next up, we have Tori at 7.83, so the twins rounding out the bottom here. However, Tori getting 4th does help the average a little bit. So without Tori getting 4th, she actually would have been last, probably. Anyway, so Tori at 7.83. Next up, we have Scott at 7.5, which is actually quite surprising, because Scott is actually a pretty good fantasy owner. He's finished 9th, 11th, and 10th. And in other years, he's finished as low as 5, and he's finished 5 3 times, actually. So Scott just seems to not be able to crack the top 4. Next up, we have Eli at 7.33, but that's only over 3 years. Eli has finished 2nd, 9th, and 11th. But, I think better days are ahead for Eli. Gabe, on the other hand, actually that's not true. Travis is at 6.67, so I think he's 5th overall in finishing, which kind of makes sense since he's finished 2nd, 3rd, and 6th, and 7th, but then he's had the ball sack and 10th. So obviously we'll see if 2016 and 2017 were an anomaly, but again, something to kind of look into. And next up we have Gabe, which I was going to mention before. Gabe has every time Gabe drafts at, or the back end of the draft, 11th or 12th, he's finished 8th the last 2 years. So I don't know if it's huge causation correlation situation here, but maybe Gabe look for a top 5 pick, because when you picked in the 5th spot in 2016, you got 3rd. So maybe try to do better in the Spring Sports Spectacular, or try to emphasize those top 5 or 6 picks. That might help you out. Next up, we have both Weston and CJ tying at 5.67. So I believe this is like the 5th and 6th range in terms of like league standings or whatever else. I kind of forgot what ranking we're at right now. But, I had mentioned those 2 interesting statistics about draft positions and for both CJ and Weston off the top, so I'm just going to kind of skip ahead. Next up, we have Brittany at 4.5. Brittany has kind of always finished top 5. She's only finished 1 year as 7th. Every other year it has been top 5. So this kind of fits. It just shows Brittany is like this close to getting the championship so many times, and I think it's just luck. Brittany does such a great job during the regular season. I think it's just a matter of luck when you get into the playoffs and how your teams come together. Next up, we have Brady at 2nd overall, which is quite surprising. He's won twice, but he's never gotten worse than 9th, which is pretty good, especially when you're finishing 1st overall in back-to-back years. But yeah, Brady's 2nd at 3.83, and of course, 1st place in cumulative average in the league is myself, the commish, at 3. I'm averaging 3rd place every year, which is ironic or a coincidence, because I finished 3rd this year. I finished 3rd. I've never finished 3rd before. I finished 4th. I finished 2nd twice, and I've won once, and I finished 6th in 2013. So again, like I was saying, I've made the playoffs the past 6 years, and I've never missed the playoffs in terms of the whole league history. But anyway, those are some interesting tidbits and facts that I want to kind of go over. And yeah, so some kind of historical stuff I'll go over a little bit later, but at this time, that's it. I got to get ready to get out of here, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful and safe New Year's Eve. Peace out.